Welcome back. It has been an interesting ride for Sarasota School Superintendent Todd Bowden. From the get-go, the superintendent was dogged by accusations of harassment by 3 women working for the school district. An investigation found the allegations unfounded, although 1 woman is now suing. The superintendent has had a challenging relationship with the Teachers Association and more challenging relationship with Sheriff Tom Knight. A rough go-around with the school board during his performance review. And on the other hand, there is no arguing with the results. The school district is maintaining its A rating as one of the best school districts in the entire state, and that means a lot. And joining us for more is Sarasota School Superintendent Todd Bowden. Superintendent, welcome.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
Well, let's start with the good news, because the A rating, that is something, given the environment, given the the resources and the lack of resources from the state. What do you think that A rating means?
It means that we've continued a tradition of excellence. I had a clear understanding when I assumed the job of superintendent that that was an expectation placed upon us. In other districts, they are working towards an A. Anything less than an A would be unacceptable here in Sarasota. And so when there was a transition in leadership, certainly there was questions about, are we going to continue on this track? Are we going to take a step forward? Are we going to move forward? And so what I'm excited about is not only have we maintained our A, but we're on an upward trajectory. We added 4 points to our score. We've closed the gap on the highest performing district in the state. We've got them in our sights, and we're shooting for #1.
We're going to talk about the other issues in a few minutes, but given the A rating, do you sometimes wonder, hey, listen, we're doing a good job here. We're getting the results. Our kids are getting the results, but everything else is what, a distraction? Or did you expect all the other stuff is it noise to you, or is it stuff that you take seriously?
Well, I think you have to have an ear on. You cannot run a public school district without the support of your community. And so, as proud as we are of that A, there's still work to be done. And so what we can't allow is the A to serve as cover and to say we're an A-rated district, everything's fine, there's no problems to be addressed. That's how you lose the A, quite honestly, is that you just say the things we're doing must be working, let's not touch it. And so my challenge has been, from the start, is to figure out the things that are working, that are effective, and to leave them in place. To find the things that can be improved upon and improve them, and find the things that are ineffective and do away with those practices. And that's harder to do, quite frankly, in an A-rated district than it is in other places, because everything that you do, someone will attribute that to, well, the reason that we got the A is because of that practice.
Are you kind of surprised by the number of different constituencies out there that has made it seems like the school system and the public, we're not presenting a united front?
I think that's absolutely true, and I think it's symptomatic of public education across the state right now, is that we're in an interesting time in our history. There are those that want to profit from public education, and to do so, they have to diminish the role of public education to get there. And so we have a high-performing district here in Sarasota, but yes, there are those that want to detract from our success.
Okay, we have to take a quick break. Our conversation with Sarasota School Superintendent Todd Bowden will continue. Welcome back. The new school year, a new school security plan, and much more. Joining us is Sarasota School Superintendent Todd Bowden. So we were talking about how the relationship with the sheriff went wrong in the days after Parkland. You talked about the contribution of Eric Robertson, the school board member, to that problem. How did Mr. Robinson hurt your relationship with the sheriff?
At a time in which the sheriff and I should be having direct conversations, Mr. Robinson was there really kind of stirring things up. I would have
In what way?
I'd have conversations with the sheriff, conversations that I think were very productive, and then I'd get a phone call from Eric and say, the sheriff said this or the sheriff said that, and I'd say, Eric, I talked to the sheriff today. I trust that what he said to me represents his opinion, and so it was kind of running as this go-between. I think a lot of the confusion was because the messages being carried back and forth were not consistent.
And I would imagine the text messages were not helpful.
Shocking.
Did you ever go to the sheriff and said, you know, Tom, we've always gotten along. How did we get here? How could we fix this?
You know, the sheriff and I have not had the chance to really sit down and repair
Why
that
not?
relationship.
Why
The fact of the matter is, at this point, he would prefer to work through the board chair. He does not recognize the superintendent as the CEO of the organization. And so at this point, all of our efforts are on standing up our police department. I'm excited that a relationship is developing between our chief of police and the sheriff. I think there's a mutual respect there that they're both lawmen, and so right now we're letting that be the relationship that carries the day. But certainly I hope that there's a point in time in which the sheriff and I can sit down and figure out a way to kind of put the past in the past and do the right thing.
Because even if you have your own police department, you still have to have a rapport with the chief law enforcement officer in the county, and I know there's a lot of water under the bridge there. But when you look at what happened here, what mistakes, if any, did you make?
You know, I go back to, you know, the frequency and not bringing the sheriff to the table. I was having conversations with the sheriff. We did bring him into an executive session with the board as a whole, but I think he wanted a seat at that table earlier on. And so, you know, the other thing is, you know, the sheriff gives advice, but, you know, the board is sovereign in its decision making. And so, you know, there was a point in time where, you know, the sheriff gave some advice and the board said, thank you, I think we're going to go in a different direction. And so certainly that's part of it.
All right, let's talk a little bit about your relationship with the school board. You just had your performance review recently. It did not go all that well. There was even some discussion about changing the provisions in your contract in terms of termination. What happened with your relationship with the school board that hired you not all that long ago?
So, you know, I think as you look at that evaluation process, it highlighted the divide on our school board. I have a base of support today. I would say that support is tenuous at best. It's a 3-2 majority. But if you look at those evaluations, the majority of the board has found my performance to be effective or higher. There is a minority on the board who's found me to be less than effective. And there really is no middle ground. It's a case in two extremes.
I think in terms of talking to your supporters on the board who to this day you know, support you and defend you, I think the perception is that you have to do a better job in terms of defending yourself, because in those candidates, those school board members are up for re-election, and they're on the front line in terms of defending the superintendent there. Is your relationship with Bridget Ziegler and Eric Robinson something that can be improved upon at this stage?
I think you have to look at those relationships separately. I spent an hour and a half with Ms. Ziegler yesterday. It was a great conversation, very productive. At this point in time, there's not a lot of conversation with Mr. Robinson. And so do I think that we can get to a point, I have a productive working relationship with Ms. Ziegler? Absolutely yes. With Mr. Robinson, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure.
If there's anything you would like to say to him right here, right now, what would that be?
You know, at the end of the day, it's about our kids. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that. I think what I'm most troubled about when you look at where we are through the lens of a superintendent is that by design, we're supposed to have a nonpartisan board. But there are clearly raw partisan politics at play. And I just think that's wrong.
Also, another difficult relationship has been with the Teachers Association. Is that relationship and rapport solely because of two things, in terms of you have to negotiate contracts with them, but also there have been these harassment charges that have been out there? Has that basically short-circuited your relationship with the Teachers Association?
Well, I made a very conscious decision to interact with the teachers union in a different way than my predecessor. And I think part of that is responsible for where we're at today. You know, our prior superintendent met with them on a weekly basis. You know, they had pretty open access at the landings to come and go as they please and talk to various staff. I prefer a model in which we have a point person. We promoted our director of human resources to an executive director position. And what we said is the contact with the union should come with our labor relations specialist. Now, at the same time, what I said was, when you feel like you need to have conversation with the superintendent, my door is open to you. Just pick up the phone and call my secretary.
But has that not been counterproductive from the point of view that look, the teachers union is supporting candidates for the school board who are running against your best supporters on the school board? Why not have an open door all the time in order to maintain that kind of relationship?
That door is open all the time. They've not placed the first phone call saying we'd like time with the superintendent. You know, we talked a little bit about my contract. You know, there's a provision in my contract that says I can be fired at any time. One of the first newsletters that came from the union to its membership was to seize upon that clause. And essentially to them that was a signal that our time is better spent trying to find 3 votes to fire him than to work with him. And so their efforts have been, well, let's just get the guy fired. We don't have to work with him. And so I think the best thing that can happen is for the board to say, listen, you got to work with the superintendent. You know, he is the person that's going to lead this district, and we want you treated with respect, but that's going to be how we're going to operate going forward.
All right. We did mention the harassment allegations. Even when the process of hiring you, that's when we first learned about them. The school district's investigation did not produce any, you know, they said it was unfounded, but now one of the women who is accusing you is filing suit. So I know that you have said that you are eager for this suit to proceed forward, but what do you want every mom and dad and teacher in the Sarasota School District to know about these allegations? Because in this day and age, we take these things more seriously than ever before.
And we should. We absolutely should. And in the era of Me Too, is you should take those accusations extremely seriously. But you should also understand that just because an accusation is made, it doesn't make it true. And so what I can tell you is that I am 100% confident in my conduct at all times, is that I have done nothing that I would be ashamed of. I've done nothing that would be, that I would shame my mother, my wife, my daughter. I'm proud of my actions. You know, I've been married for 18 years, faithfully married for 18 years. And so this process of dealing with these false accusations, when I use the word excited, is if it takes a civil action to finally put this to rest, then let's have a civil action and let's move on.
Has this situation clouded everything else in terms of your other relationships with the board and people outside?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, you use the term distraction, and so there's lots of things circulating out there. I'd certainly like to clear the air on this point and move forward.
Okay. We have to take a quick break, and we'll be back for final thoughts in a moment. Stay with us. Time for final thoughts, and joining us is Sarasota School Superintendent Todd Bowden. So, Superintendent, it's been a busy time for you ever since you took this job here. There's so many balls in the air in terms of your relationship with the school board, with certain members of the school board, with Sheriff Knight, and with the other allegations that will be going through the court process. How do you continue to do what you're doing when there are these other issues going on here? Because every mom and dad would want to know that their school superintendent is focused only on the education of their kids and nothing else.
That is my greatest challenge on a day-to-day basis, is to see through that and remember why we do what we do. There is no one who sits in the chair that I sit in that doesn't realize that public education changes lives. And it's about those 43,000 students. I had someone say to me the other day, just as you govern yourself on a day-to-day basis, remember that there are 43,000 pairs of eyes looking at you. And I think that's a pretty good way to govern yourself.
One more question here. We have a temporary situation where you're going to have the sheriff's office SROs in the school for another year. You're building your police department. When we reconvene at the Trapezoid next year around this time, Is this issue going to be settled, that you're going to, the school district is going to be on its own in terms of its police force and not need the sheriff's office in the schools like they are now?
Absolutely. Our course of action is clear. We're moving into the elementary schools this year. We're prepared to go to the middle and high schools the following year. It's a 2-year timeline. The majority of the board has given me my marching orders, and we are executing those orders. Yes, our course of action is clear that when we arrive for the start of the school year in August of 2019, our internal police force will be on the job.
So next year when we do this interview, you're going to be sitting here with Tom Knight?
I hope so. I hope so. I'm certainly open to that. I'm certainly open to that.
Okay. And if there's anything that you want to say both to the sheriff and to Mr. Robinson right now, what would that be?
You know, I think at the end of the day, it's about our kids. And if we can just return to doing what's best for our kids, and if there's anything that I have contributed, then I'm happy to set my ego aside. You know, we're all men of ego, and just to say, is there a way to hit restart, to let bygones be bygones, and remember that at the end of the day, our job is to, number one, make sure these kids return home to their families at the end of the day, and we hope that we do that and we leave them better off than the way we found them that morning.
All right, Superintendent, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
All right, we want to thank our guest, Sarasota School Superintendent Todd Bowden.